Rolling. 1, 2, mic check. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Status Coup News. It is Wednesday, March the 1st. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Guys, Status Coup is the best outlet, whoops, hush computer, bringing you all of the on the ground news coming from East Palestine, Ohio, as we are about a month away from that massive train derailment and subsequent quote unquote chemical controlled release that, of course, released basically a mushroom cloud of chemical toxins over the community of East Palestine in eastern Ohio and also affected parts of western Pennsylvania. Louis DeAngelis is joining us today. Louis has been on the ground for many days in East Palestine, and we have a lot of contradictory news coming out of that part of the world today, with Governor Mike DeWine making a visit to the site and also the EPA administrator making some confounding comments, shall we say, about whether or not children should be interacting with the contaminated water in East Palestine. But Louis, I'm so glad to be joined by you to discuss this and to get into some of the meat of a lot of your reporting, which has been very good and extensive. But let's go ahead and get started with Governor DeWine making a return to East Palestine. And again, the residents there still receiving conflicting reports. Louis, would you agree with that about the safety of being able to return back to the evacuated zone and the ability to safely consume the water and I guess just exist in East Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's been kind of thing after thing after thing here where the messaging is all over the place, whether it be from the governor's office, whether it be from the Ohio EPA, the federal EPA, the railroad initially, because as we've covered, unfortunately, most of the information that was getting out about this in the beginning was all just, oh, the contractors from the railroad told us that this is okay. And then you've got the politicians listening to those contractors from the railroad, who then pass the information along to the media, who just, are spitting out whatever these press releases were going for, and spitting out the information. So the information has been all over the place. The residents of East Palestine, for the most part, are not buying it at this point. And good for them for doing a lot of this research into it themselves as well. I was on the ground there for about a week last week. I'm fortunately at home for a little bit right now. But I can say that we're already planning to get back to East Palestine within the next 2 weeks. We're working on the final details there, but I will be back on the ground in East Palestine in the next 2 weeks for Status Coup to keep on this story. This is by far the most important story in the U.S. right now, and we're going to make sure we stay on it. A lot of the media is, out of town, after covering this. They flew in for Trump basically last week for the circus surrounding all of that. They left basically the next day. There was a lot of coverage early on this, which is good that they covered it for a bit, but we know how quickly these things start to fade away and how it becomes less and less of an important story for whatever reason at the corporate media level. But again, we'll be staying on this. But yes, to your point, the information has been all over the place. The governor, for sure, is one person who's had their information all over the place. You go ahead.
Well, before we get into the meat and dive headfirst into it, you raise a very perfect opportunity for us to remind all of the Status Quo viewers that it is imperative that you support the work of this channel, because as you heard, Louis is going back to East Palestine. We got to get Louis's respirator masks and his hazmat suit and all of the things that I'm not even attempting to be flippant here, but in seriousness, to bring you this kind of reporting, it does require material support. So if you have not already, please use this opportunity to become a material member of Status Coup. You can do so right here via YouTube. Also, subscribe to the Substack of Status Coup and make sure that we can continue to bring you this on the ground reporting in ways that the corporate media is able to, Louis, but they refuse to. So
absolutely. I mean, it was thing after thing too, where I would personally see on the ground. We encountered Governor Mike DeWine on the ground on that trip. The only reason I found out where he was I received a text message from a resident that I'd been talking to for about a week and a half on this topic before I even got to East Palestine. She texted me saying, the governor's in front of my house right now. Get over here. Nobody's asking him any questions about anything. We went over there. There were 4 or 5 journalists from more mainstream outlets, local news, that sort of thing. No one else was even approaching him with a question. And I went up and you can watch it after the live stream here, but the governor lied and also bended the truth on a couple other things, tried to dodge the question. You're not getting that kind of reporting. You're not getting that kind of accountability journalism from any other, from any other of these corporate outlets for the most part. There's obviously some exceptions to the rule, but if you can support the kind of reporting we're doing, we're out there actually talking to residents. Even since I've been home, I've been talking to residents on the phone every single day. I'm getting texts every day from these folks. I know Jordan is as well, where this is something that is hard to pull off, but we are dedicated to making it happen. So if you can become a member, definitely do so.
And tragically, this incident in East Palestine is just the latest in what has been a cascade of self-inflicted wounds and easily preventable catastrophes that have further contaminated the water, soil, and air of this country and contaminated the people as well. So let's get started with what Mike DeWine was in East Palestine and his comments today. I know Colin has a couple of clips, so let's check out the governor's remarks in East Palestine.
Well, it's a huge operation. I guess I wish every citizen could see it in Columbiana County and around the state. Hundreds of people working here, from truck drivers to people who are actually working in the stream. And, it's a long process, but it's a very impressive process with Ohio EPA, U.S. EPA, the railroad. Local officials have been phenomenal. And, when you first see where the train wreck was, I think you can kind of have some visualization of what the firemen and women who were first responded to that. I mean, I have great admiration for them. I mean, these are volunteers. They came on the scene, and it's tough.
Seeing it up that close, I mean, it's one thing to see it from a drone, or it's one thing to read about it. To see it up that close, it's impressive, but also scary.
Well, it's certainly very scary. And, as we always say, members of fire departments, they run towards problems. The rest of us run away. And they were running into this and not knowing, frankly, what was on that train. So, great admiration for them. Frankly, I have a great admiration for all the people who are out here. This is an amazing operation. It's a big operation.
Listening to those comments from Governor DeWine raises an interesting question about the safety of first responders. For example, the firefighters there. And it sounded like the governor was saying that the firefighters were not necessarily aware of the kind of fire that they were going to fight. And that also continues to raise issues about communities being notified of the kinds of chemicals, the kinds of hazardous materials that are being transported regularly throughout their communities, potentially on shaky, unreliable, unsafe rail lines.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, that was kind of a comment he made at the end. Firefighters showing up, not knowing what they're getting themselves into. In this case here, and it's at this point, vinyl chloride, for those of you who don't know this yet, has a boiling temperature of 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. It's also something that is a chemical fire. This is not something that you actually want to be dumping water on in this case. So you had upwards of 50 fire departments responding to the initial derailment here, and dumping tons of water on the situation, potentially making it much worse. So the governor's comments there, based on some of the other things I'm digging into, actually kind of check out, because if they did know what was there, they would have been getting in foam to put this fire out much sooner than they did. Eventually, that was what happened. But dumping fire on this chemical fire that was happening, dumping water on this chemical fire that was happening is not what you would be doing in the situation. First responders were very likely showing up with gear that was not necessarily meant for the harsh chemicals that they were walking right into. It's irresponsible at best. The railroad knows what's on their train, or they should know what's on their train. That information should have been sent to not only first responders right away, but to residents right away as well.
And there was a good piece today by Margaret Kimberly in the Black Agenda Report, and it's called East Palestine and the Oligarchy. And basically, she does a brilliant job of summing up how the U.S. ruling class, these railroad line owners, dictate to the rest of us how it's going to go. If it's going to be safe, that's not their problem. They are not interested in the public good. They are there to purchase politicians to make sure that regulations remain either invisible or next to nearly non-existent. They're there to dictate the narrative coming out by the corporate media. As you observe, Lewis, the corporate media is not asking no real questions here.
Right.
You know, they're asking very superficial questions and not getting to the meat of the problem, which is, of course, it is corporate capitalist greed that dictates this country. It is not the corporate capitalist interests that are keeping the health and the well-being of us residents of East Palestine and of course other places front of mind. It's about maximizing these profits first and foremostly.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of speculation that the only reason folks are in town right now, again, I think it was in the last clip we just played, but interrupt me if it's not. The governor made a comment there that it's going to take a while before the community is safe to come back to here, right? So have we played that clip already or no?
No. Let's get it. Let's check that one out, Colin.
Yeah.
Been down here to look at the whole operation. Look, I mean, the whole goal here is to make this community safe, and it can't happen overnight. You can't get all this stuff out of here overnight, but just looking at what we were looking at here and looking at the stream and how they're constantly trying to agitate the water, doing the things that they need to do so that you're slowly making that better.
And so to answer your question and use some more words from the governor here, yes, the getting the money flowing again through with these trains rolling through East Palestine is exactly what was the main motivator for getting all of this going again here. You heard the governor there say it's going to take a while to get East Palestine safe again. Does that mean that it's unsafe right now? Based on what I saw, there's a lot of reason to believe that it is unsafe. Based on the tests that are being done, and more importantly, the tests that are not being done, I would say that there is a lot of concern that the town might not be safe. Based on walking into the gas station or the residents' homes who live right near the tracks, the local corner store, whatever, the bar, any of this stuff, I can tell you firsthand that in a lot of these places you walk in and you immediately know that something is not right. There's a lot of speculation in town that the only reason that the evacuation order was lifted after the roughly 3 days during the controlled burn was because if there's an evacuation order lifted in town, that means the trains can't be going through town either. You've got conductors and staff on board. So if there's still an evacuation order going on, Norfolk Southern can't be, using their money printer to, send more and more trains through town with more and more chemicals. So it's all right. Let's get these tracks rebuilt ASAP. There was also a lot of pressure probably on doing this controlled burn as well, because, well, this is going to be the fastest way to dispose of all of this stuff, not necessarily the safest way to dispose all of it. So let's light the stuff on fire. Let's clean up as much as we can in a short period of time. And then let's get people back in this town so that we can get the trains rolling through town again. And I can tell you from while I was there, there's times of the day where the train would go by every 10 minutes. We saw train cars where they're able to, when it's shipping containers being double stacked. Residents were telling me that it's not normal to have double stacked trains going through here. Normally it's single stacked trains. So they're packing even more onto these trains that are already in many cases 1.5 miles long, just to get the money flowing again to keep the whole system going. It's ridiculous.
And truthfully, I mean, the EPA is a participatory accomplice in a lot of this, right? Because they are the ones that are supposed to be the trusted government agency that residents would listen to give them the all clear to return back to their homes. And Lewis, here we are 3 weeks to almost a month out from this train derailment and the subsequent controlled burn. What kind of symptoms are residents still experiencing, and have they noticed an increase in their symptoms, a decrease in their symptoms? How are people describing to you their overall health and how they're feeling, and the effects on the animals and their pets in the area?
Absolutely, and I'll get to that in just a second too. But I do think it is very important to note too, with all of this, that the governor has contradicted himself on this sort of stuff. And like in these first two clips that we're showing, it's very clear. You know, while I was in town, he's out in town walking around, having a sip of water for his photo op, saying everything's fine, everything's safe, it's safe to go back to East Palestine. Everything's all good, making that be the main narrative coming out. And then we hear him in this last clip over here saying it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort to make East Palestine safe. So I just want to hammer that point home, because the governor and tons of officials all up and down the rankings are contradicting themselves left and right on a lot of stuff here. So I want to make that point. But as far as the symptoms that folks are experiencing with all of this, even yesterday, we had resident Corey Figley on. He was standing in an area along the stream where a dam had overflown a little bit, and he took some videos of it and was spending some time there. And this is a stream that is highly polluted with this chemical that leaked from the train and is running through town. And he got a strong odor of all of this, and all night and the next morning had a sore throat, dry eyes. That lasted into the next day. We've got residents who are ending up in the hospital with breathing complications, needing nebulizer treatment, including some kids and teenagers who have never had any symptoms like this ever before. I would say somewhere between a third and a half of the town potentially is exposing or is experiencing these rashes and things like this that they've never experienced before. Nosebleeds, especially it sounds like amongst kids, are getting lots of nosebleeds at night. Some of the more serious ones, I mean, we've had residents as far as 15 miles away in some cases actually being diagnosed with chemical exposure by doctors on their medical paperwork, dealing with blood in their stool, dealing with all sorts of just horrible symptoms as a result of this. And the unfortunate reality is, when some of these folks are going to the clinic that is set up in town by the state of Ohio, that clinic is actually not providing any actual medical treatments, not providing any actual testing of any kind, whether it be urine or blood testing to tell you if you're exposed to any of this stuff. Instead, they're providing somebody to talk to and referrals to your regular doctor, basically. So hopefully you've got good health insurance that will cover this sort of thing to go to your regular doctor, because the state clinic isn't going to be able to do anything for you. But what the state clinic will do is essentially try to gaslight you into thinking that the rashes that you're getting, it's because of the stress. Stress, Kim. Can you believe that?
Stress.
The stress. Now, granted, it is a stressful situation, but I don't think you get half of a town to all get stress rashes at the same time. Just so happens to be right after this chemical explosion happens in their town at the fault of Norfolk Southern. I don't know.
Absolutely incredible, and the response coming from the federal government is also less than impressive by and large.
Oh, yeah.
We know that the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited East Palestine last week, as did former President Donald Trump. Joe Biden has said he's not going out to East Palestine, which, okay, cool. But the EPA administrator was out in East Palestine. I believe it was today. Michael Regan was there, again, giving some interesting messaging about the waterways and the safety for people, I suppose, to interact with the creeks and the streams in and around East Palestine. Do we have a video clip for that, or we just had the piece call in?
Big concern for people around here, but at this time the EPA is not testing for the dioxins because there's not a base level. Wouldn't it be still beneficial to test for those dioxins in the soil for people who grow crops and for people who have animals that are going to consume the things that come from the soil as well?
Yeah. You want me to take that? Yeah, I think that, from a just a basic standpoint, dioxin exists whether you're burning a campfire or grilling out.
Sure, this would be totally a different situation.
It would. And so, with everything that we are measuring for, we know what those levels are. Dioxin would be a byproduct of that. And so because we know that those measurements are below the health standards and we understand the impact of that, then we can confidently say that we don't believe that there is a higher level of dioxin based on this accident. So I think that there is an outstanding question of what is the sort of baseline and dioxin footprint of the community. And I think that's something that we're willing to explore. I think that that's something that we want to follow the science and test. What we want to do, though, is we want to keep our resources focused on what we believe to be the most immediate threat to the community, and not necessarily be diverted away from that. However, as I said with the soil testing and everything else, if there are certain things that we need to do to go the extra mile to provide the community comfort, then that's up for discussion and we're willing to explore. I just wanted to sort of be clear from our vantage point what the science says, that dioxin as a byproduct of this disaster being elevated, well, we just don't believe that to be true.
Interesting there coming from Michael Regan, the EPA administrator. However, the EPA Region 5 administrator is quoted as saying, her name is Deborah Shore. Deborah has said repeatedly that there is, quote, no baseline for dioxins in the area, and that it would be hard to attribute any of that to the derailment specifically. And it also says that, yes, the dioxins are also ubiquitous thanks to our reliance on plastic. So, but it also, however, it's important to note that they are not going to find what they're not testing for, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that the things that they're not testing for aren't present, and it doesn't mean that those things are not subsequently harmful to the residents.
Absolutely. And I talked to more than one expert on dioxin on the record, including Dr. Stephen Lester, who was a speaker at one of the town halls that we covered, as well as another gentleman at the event as well. Both of them and several other folks that we've talked to off the record as well. And just to give folks an idea too, I mean, we are actively talking to more and more experts on all of these subjects so that we can provide more information and more clear information to folks, because obviously there are a lot of difficult chemicals, names, all sorts of stuff going on here. So know that, you know, I'm not an expert in some of this stuff. I don't think Kim's an expert in some of this stuff, but we are actively talking to experts to kind of pull some of this information together. So with Dr. Stephen Lester, he mentioned dioxins are absolutely going to be present when you have an explosion like this. Particularly, there's a specific dioxin, which is one of the most dangerous chemicals that exists, that very well is going to be created in an explosion like this. We talked about this before, but dioxins are a concern in East Palestine, yes, but they're also going to be a concern anywhere where that massive freaking cloud went. If you haven't seen the drone footage that East Palestine resident Corey Figley provided to us while we were on our trip after this live stream, definitely encourage you to check out that video on our channel. That's exclusive video. Colin, if you want to play some of it while I talk, yes, that's perfect. So this is actually from the night of, but in a second, you're going to see some of the cloud from the actual day of the quote unquote controlled burn. So the dioxins in this image right here would be carried up into the air in this giant plume with thermal energy, like a thermal that would carry these things up. But dioxins notably are heavier than air, okay? So they're going to be launched up into the air with these giant clouds here. And as you can see now, I mean, that massive mushroom cloud, or whatever you want to call it, spreads well beyond East Palestine, well beyond the 1 mile radius. And who knows where it continued to blow in the air. Unfortunately, the wind direction changed a couple times during this. So initially the debris was blown to the southeast, and then it shifted more towards the north. So dioxin is a concern in East Palestine, absolutely, because obviously they're right at ground zero where that is happening, as you can see on the screen. But everywhere where that smoke went, where that debris went, whatever you want to call it, dioxins very likely would be settling on the ground, but we will never know if we don't test for it. We will never know if we don't test for it. The fact that it is not being tested for at this point is absolutely criminal, in my opinion. Dioxin, just to give folks an idea, if you hadn't heard this yesterday when I talked about this, dioxin is, again, one of the most harmful chemicals that we know about. In people, it eventually leads to all sorts of different types of cancers. It can lead to issues if you're a woman wanting to have a baby. It can lead to Dr. Stephen Lester, I believe, mentioned it can even lead to diabetes and all sorts of things like this down the line. And one of the scary elements of this as well is that it doesn't just necessarily go away, right? So I'll give two quick examples. If dioxins land in a farmer's field, right, and they're planting vegetables. Now, this isn't the case with all vegetables, but one example that was given to me was Brussels sprouts. It's not just Brussels sprouts, but that's one example. The Brussels sprouts will actually absorb in the dioxins as the Brussels sprout grows, and now the dioxins will be inside of the Brussels sprouts. I buy some Brussels sprouts from the region at the grocery store or from wherever, the farm stand, and I eat the Brussels sprouts. Now I have dioxin in me. Dioxin isn't processed by my body. It gets absorbed by lipids and can eventually get into your liver and other parts of your body and begin to cause the health effects on me. And then the scariest element of all of this is that dioxins can actually be passed on to another generation. So that's the example with people. Think about this with livestock. If you've got cows grazing grass in the field, which would be common for that sort of industry, and they're, let's say, a dairy cow, the dioxins can actually be found in the milk. I don't need to elaborate on all of this much further for you to start to connect the dots and see how absolutely important testing for dioxins is in this case. And that's why we're seeing a lot of science experts speaking out, being rightfully concerned about this.
Those pictures, that drone footage just absolutely made my blood run cold. And
Yeah.
and to your point about basically what is being burned off or what has been released into the air these are basically forever chemicals. I mean, for all intents and purposes. I don't know the whole schedule or listing of what forever chemicals are, but as you said, these things just don't necessarily dissipate once they reach a certain level of in the atmosphere or in the air. I long suspected ever since this controlled burn that a lot of that chemical mushroom ended up blowing eastward, and who knows what we all have been breathing in for those that live east of where the train derailed and southeast of where that area also derailed as well. But in terms of the water and the water consumption there, Lewis, the messages coming from the local EPA, I believe the Ohio EPA, is telling residents that the well water is safe for consumption. How when we're seeing all of these dead fish into the local streams and creeks, we can only assume that the groundwater would also be contaminated because these chemicals obviously seep down into the soil and beyond.
Right. So officials up at this point, so there's kind of like two situations that people could be in with water in the area. So either you're on the municipal water or you have a private well. If you have a private well, I believe the message has been like, get a test of your private well, but it should be fine. I wouldn't be concerned about it, sort of thing. The municipal water, folks in town are just being told it's that your water is fine. That's why you've got images of Governor DeWine, doing his photo op. I don't know if anyone saw the video of that. We don't have it pulled. Don't worry about it. But
it was it was Obama's Flint moment.
It was like a
bad nightmare reenacted.
Yeah, not real looking thing. And to be frank too, like having a sip of the water is not going to kill you, right? One sip, you're out of the creek it might, but out of the drinking water supply, having one sip of it, you're going to be fine. The issue is drinking it day in and day out, showering in it day in and day out for weeks, months, and years, right?
Washing your clothes in it,
exactly,
bathing babies in it. Yep.
So a concern that I've been looking into in the last couple days here, more so, and the red flag first went off for me when I did an interview with Bob Bocock, who is the kind of science and water expert who actually works with Aaron Brockovich's team. He gave me some time to do an interview with him. We haven't posted it in full yet, but Colin, if we want to get ready to pull that clip of my interview with Bob, where he expresses some concern, and then I'll get into a little bit more detail about why afterwards.
Is the contamination in the drinking water supply? I've been told it's not. They need to be testing every hour to convince me of that,
right,
especially when you see this type of condition here. It's interesting. So the area, the state of Ohio identified this in what they call a source water protection plan. And that source water protection plan is updated every 5 to 10 years, depending on the conditions in the situation like this. There are 5 groundwater wells situated in this park That's the drinking water
Right.
supply. They're literally right here, right next to us right now. And so the state in that source water protection plan identified the protection zone at 0. I've looked at 10,000 source water protection plans in the United States of America, and very, very few have a source water protection of 0. So they're already basically stating that this is a problem.
And now I also want to get into one other thing too here. So note that he mentions the source water protection plan here. There is one other clip that I don't think we've played yet. That is the Ohio EPA person today standing in basically exactly that same spot. I just want to make sure we get across the point that she makes today, that she made today, and tie these two things together and go into some more detail. Colin, that's 843 to 943 of the first interview.
What you're looking at is the confluence of Leslie and sulfur that are coming in, and that's what we've said all along at Ohio EPA, that we know the contamination was here immediately. So the crew from Ohio EPA was on site immediately. A lot of this containment was constructed within hours of the derailment to keep the spill from going any farther downstream. So what you're looking at now is the containment that's still there, and when we see any product, we're able to vacuum that out and store it and remove it safely. But what you're talking about then is the longer term process that we've been describing, where yes, we introduce air through sparging to speed up the biological breakdown of the contaminants, but also then the next phase is to actually stir up the sediment under the creek to get the product out of the ground that's under the creek, introduce it to the air, and again, speed up that biological breakdown.
I don't like the way any of that sounds.
Yes, and frankly, you shouldn't like the way that any of that sounds. So the big thing that stuck out to me there, and that's somebody with the Ohio EPA, a high-ranking official of the Ohio EPA. I don't know her exact title offhand here, but the big thing she said was, we knew the contamination was here immediately, okay? We knew the contamination was here immediately. You heard the interview that I did with Bob there saying the public drinking water comes from wells that are in the park, basically some of them just a couple hundred feet away from where we were standing. Both that clip that we just played with the Ohio EPA person, as well as the clip of me interviewing Bob, those are about 50 feet apart from each other. We're standing in basically the same part of town. I did a little bit more digging into what Bob meant by saying the groundwater protection was essentially 0. Colin, if you want to pull up the first document that I have here, that is not the one that I'm looking for. I'll highlight it on here. I've got it highlighted on the doc right now. This is going to be the source water protection plan.
And whose source water protection plan is this? Is this from the EPA?
This is from the EPA. So you'll notice we can go ahead and scroll down to, I lost it here. Let's see. So on the section here, susceptibility analysis on the third page. Yep. So this assessment indicates that the village of East Palestine source of drinking water has a high susceptibility to contamination because of the lack of a protective layer of clay and the presence of significant potential contamination sources in the protection area. And then I just want to find this one other part here closer to the top here. So Colin, on page 1, system description and geology. Yep. So on that, about partway down, it says, this system operates 5 wells that pump approximately 400,000 gallons of water per day from a sand and gravel aquifer within the Little Beaver Creek outwash/Kame aquifer system. Details on the drinking water wells included in Table 1. The aquifer is covered by 0 feet of low permeability material, which provides no protection from contamination. I'm going to read that last part one more time. The aquifer is covered by 0 feet of low permeability material, which provides no protection from contamination. So
So that means that there's nothing on top of this aquifer, this water, this groundwater source that could potentially absorb some of the pollutants. It is going directly into the aquifer, straight no chaser, basically. Is that how I interpret that?
Basically, so you basically got, and I'm going to give this as the most, basic version as I can, and we're still working on pushing some of this through and talking to more people about this, but there's not a layer of protective clay in this area that would take stuff from the surface getting down into the groundwater that would delay that process from happening or make it not happen at all to protect it more. It's all more like softer soils, loamy type stuff that if, things will get down into the groundwater easily, basically. There's one last little element of this that I'd like to show, Colin. We've got the one more document just below that one, and it should have a map of the groundwater in the area. I will highlight that one on the doc as well. And what this is going to show in a second here is the spot in the park is basically right on the edge of the groundwater supply. Yep, that looks like the correct document, Colin. And if you can zoom in a bit towards the inner circle there. Yep. So on the right side of the circles here, the bottom right corner basically is right where this image was, closer to between the P on Palestine and the edge of the blue circle there is right where all of this kind of testing was all of these kind of sprayers were spraying water into the air, where the EPA says they know that the chemicals are present in this area on the edge of the circle there and then up towards the kind of round track there are where the drinking water wells for the city of East Palestine are. So again, it is right on the edge of this line. Okay. This map looks very approximate to me. I would be extremely concerned, to use Bob Bocock's words. He was saying you would need to be testing that water every single day for me to be confident in the drinking water in the city of East Palestine to be safe. So that is a major red flag to me. The Ohio EPA said right there they knew the contamination was there immediately. What they're doing is basically pumping water and spraying it up into the air, making the vinyl chloride and other chemicals that are in the water at that point be released into the air. Frankly, there's homes and things like that right in this area that makes the air to breathe very dangerous near there. I can tell you personally, you can smell it when you're near those areas. And then, unfortunately, it's not actually removing all of it, because I personally went downstream. We also had a video we posted yesterday of other folks who went downstream from there, miles downstream in some cases. There is still chemicals in the water downstream of all of these filtering devices that they're referencing here.
Of course, how could there not be? To hear that state EPA administrator, the Ohio environmental administrator, say, "Oh, we just got the vacuum when we saw the solid stuff. We just got the vacuum and sucked it right on up." It's like, okay, but what about the particles that are not visible to the naked eye or not able to be sucked up by your cleanup machine? What are the things that are clear, that have no color necessarily to them, that just look as though they're just part of the water source? I mean, these sort of Mickey Mouse answers that I feel that these officials are giving the residents is just not cutting it. So what is the sentiment of the residents there? Because clearly government has failed them. Federal and state governments have failed them. Their public safety and their health is being expensed at to maximize the profits of this massive corporation, Norfolk Southern. I mean, they're surely they can't, the residents that is, cannot be relying with any good faith upon what Mike DeWine is telling them, what the Ohio EPA is telling them, what the federal EPA is telling them.
No, for sure. And before I answer that too, I see we've got 834 people watching right now. If you have not already pressed the like button, please press the like button to help get this out to more folks. If this is your first time joining us, you've never seen us before, please hit the subscribe button. I just spent about a week on the ground in East Palestine, reporting from there, talking to residents and asking the tough questions that a lot of, frankly, the mainstream media have not been. I've already got the return trip planned in less than 2 weeks. I'll be back on the ground there. We've got a ton of content that has not been released yet that will be posted on this channel. So please give us a subscribe. If you've been watching for a while and you want to help support the kind of work that we're doing to help support getting me back on the ground in East Palestine and continuing to push this story forward, please consider becoming a member. StatusCoup.com/join. It's literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. It might not sound like a lot to, oh, is the $5 a month actually going to help? It makes a big difference when we know how many members we've got to be able to do these sorts of trips over and over again and keep reporting on this. You've seen Jordan go back and forth to Flint, Michigan. I don't even know how many times over the last 8 years. Unfortunately, East Palestine is going to be in a similar situation where we're going to need to stay on this for a while. I plan on sticking with this story and seeing it through. I'm going to do my best to just provide the absolute best coverage of this, continuing to talk with residents on the ground. To answer your question about the sentiment of the residents when all of this sort of stuff is happening, you're right. They absolutely do not trust the information that's being given to them at this point. They have no reason to trust it at this point. Again, it all started with the very beginning, right? The initial tests that were being done were essentially just being done by contractors hired by the railroad that caused the problem. Now, I don't have a degree in PR or anything like that, but if you want people to believe you, maybe don't have the person who caused the problem be in charge of picking the people who are going to test to see how bad it really is. That doesn't seem to make sense to me at all. I know that you wouldn't do that if I did something bad at a Status Coup staff meeting, you wouldn't ask me to do the investigation into did I have the wrongdoing. That doesn't make any sense at all. So residents are not trusting the information that they're getting because, frankly, it's all over the place. Number two, they're frustrated with the fact that they can't get the government to do the tests that they want done. Mm-hmm. We had one resident that we had on yesterday, Jamie Kaza, who's been absolutely she's been extremely helpful for us, connecting us with a lot of residents and whatnot. She's working with River Valley Organizing and puts on some of these town halls. Jamie was in a meeting yesterday with Senator Brown, who represents Ohio, and he was like, well, if people want to have the testing done and we're not doing it, I mean, they can just go out and go ahead and pay for that testing on their own and then save the receipts. Yeah. And then save the receipts though, and we'll reimburse you later. And Jamie asked the return question to that of, okay, so the kind of testing that needs to be done for dioxin, to the point that you made earlier, Kim, and some of these other things, it would cost $4,500 to do this. Frankly, a lot of the people that I know, and I'm using her words, can't afford that. And a lot of people that I talked to can't either. I mean, $4,500 to hopefully get reimbursed later is not an option for folks in a lot of the country, and especially in East Palestine. I mean, this is not a wealthy area. This is a lower income town. The median income for a single person is between $25,000 and $29,000 a year. The average household income is near $40,000 a year. It's not like $4,500 is nothing for them, especially when it's not guaranteed that they're going to get reimbursed for it later necessarily.
Interesting. Democrat Sherrod Brown making that suggestion. Oh, we'll just reimburse you. You poor people living in Columbiana County. You guys got $4,500 laying around.
And surely. Jordan did reach out to Senator Brown's office for comment on that. We haven't heard back yet up until this point, so we'll see what happens there.
I mean, just again, the cascading failures. Again, I hate when these situations happen. Like when COVID happened, it laid bare the glaring gaps in race, in class, in access to healthcare that we lost over 1 million people. And the similar situation here as we're seeing in East Palestine, except this was basically, intentional may not be the right word, but when you are aware that there are safety issues and the resources are available for them to be fixed and to be addressed, and they aren't, just to keep the rail lines going, this is intentional. And I think the National Transportation Safety Board, their preliminary report did indicate that this rail train derailment was 100% preventable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be done to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because sure, this happened in East Palestine right now, but even before we came on, I mean, you were saying, Kim, train tracks are pretty close to your backyard. I know, insert your small town here across the United States. Train tracks go all over the place, and in a lot of cases, they're probably carrying dangerous chemicals like we're on board this train. So it's definitely something that folks need to be pressuring their representatives, their senators, to try to be doing something about this if you want there to be change. But unfortunately, with the financial situation going on here, where many members of Congress, many members and, in government in general are directly getting money from the railroad lobbying industry. The railroad industry is lobbying big time in a lot of these races. So ultimately, we'll see if any of these regulations come to bear out. But I hope that they do, but I'm not going to hold my breath on it, frankly.
Let me mention also that today in the Ohio State House, a rail safety bill was able to pass the Ohio State House portion. I think it's going now to the Ohio State Senate to a committee for review. But many observers who follow the Ohio State legislature said that they were quite surprised, well, maybe not surprised in the wake of this train derailment. But usually when previous rail safety bills have been submitted, there has been tremendous pushback from the railroad lobby against implementing statewide safety precautions for the railroads. But this time it was able to pass. I think the quote that I read, it sailed through the Ohio House with the rail lobby not making a whole lot of noise about it today. So hopefully that will get enacted in the state of Ohio. But truthfully, this is a nationwide problem. This is not particular to Ohio. We have seen how many train derailments since this one left the tracks at East Palestine, Lewis? Like a dozen, right? A bunch.
Yeah, at least. And I mean, when you look at the numbers of how many had happened in a year, it's over 1,000 derailments per year in the United States. I mean, fortunately, most of them don't look like this one that we've just seen, but how many others could look like this in the future? I mean, it seems ridiculous that you've got over 1,000. That's more than 3 a day. The number is 1,200 or 1,300. That's more than 3 derailments a day.
Yeah.
In the United States.
I know you have to go, and I'm going to let you go right after this question.
Yeah,
I have to ask, I mean, as a journalist on the ground there covering a toxic situation of which everyone that is breathing that air and having to drink and bathe in that water is affected, what were your symptoms, if any, or did you feel anything during the time that you spent in East Palestine, and have you noticed any changes to your health or any of the symptoms that residents there had previously described?
For sure. So fortunately, we were in a situation where we could sleep upwind of town. So the hotel we were staying in was in Columbiana, which is it's only about 20 minutes away, but it's upwind. The chemical cloud never made it over that area. So the air quality and whatnot is definitely better in the area that we were sleeping. So we would be going kind of in and out of East Palestine during the daytime. I definitely experienced some things while I was there, especially in the short term. But whenever we were starting to feel that sort of stuff, we would try to, remove ourselves from the situation there. When there was a couple evenings where we would go out and getting a little bit closer to the tracks, trying to see what we could see. I was, Jordan made sure that we had the appropriate respirators with the appropriate filters and whatnot. So we were able to wear those when we were getting really close to some of the stuff. The very first night, I probably should have put it on sooner. We did a live stream there with residents who live right along the tracks. And towards the end of that live stream, I could really feel it. And we kind of stopped it. And I was like, I looked at John, the cameraman, and I was like, I got to take a break for a second. Let's start getting back out of here, basically, because as each train would go by, all sorts of dust gets kicked up into the air, basically, with God knows what in it. And you can really feel it. And those are the residents who, I've talked to most of them basically every day here still. And they're noticing this sort of thing as well, and there's certain nights that are worse than others too, because there's some nights they're removing some of the chemicals or burning things or who knows what, but some nights, from tons of reports from residents and then also being there, some nights will be worse than others. But I mean, personally, on several occasions, walking into different residents' homes, you'd walk in and they'd ask us to come in and be like, am I crazy? Or like, some people are telling me I'm crazy, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I walk in and immediately it's like, no, you are not crazy. You can immediately feel a little bit of burning in your eyes. You can feel it like in your nose as you're breathing in it a little bit. A couple instances of getting a sore throat as well, which are symptoms that lots of folks have been talking to. Fortunately, when I start to feel these things, I don't live there. I can remove myself from the situation. And continue doing the job, in a spot that isn't giving me that. So it's the kind of thing that, like, is the air in the town everywhere bad always? Probably not, right? But when you're near these areas where they're aerating the water, spraying it up into the air and having chemicals come out, yes, the air is bad there. When you're near the railroad tracks and when you're near the railroad tracks and the trains go by and it's dust getting kicked up, yes, it feels bad there. So, other than that, since I've been home, I haven't had any issues at all, other than being absolutely exhausted and constantly researching more about this all day and night, which is I'm going to take a couple days here after this to recoup a little bit. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, no issues beyond that. I know I can speak for John Farina, who was out there with me. He experienced some similar things as well. But yeah, that's, yep.
Well, thank you to you and John, truly, for I mean, at the risk of sounding corny, for your sacrifice, really, because you put yourself into a known toxic situation in order to bring the real story. I know we live in a social media age and we can do a lot of things virtually, but there's nothing that beats boots on the ground reporting and actually talking to people face to face that are experiencing this real time catastrophe. So I appreciate the work that you've done. You and John were able to bring to the channel for this very, very important and ongoing story. Louis, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Louis DeAngelis, you need to follow Louis on social media, follow him on Twitter, and continue to follow him on Status Coup for his reporting. We want to thank everybody that is tuning in to us. If you are new to Status Coup, as Louis mentioned, please take the time to not only like the video, but consider becoming a subscriber and a member of Status Coup and support the channel materially if you are able to. We appreciate your super chats and all that. I had to shut down my laptop because it started yelling in the middle of the live shot. And so my apologies if you guys have been running super chats and I have not noticed them, but that is not intentional. What's up, Colin? Are you in?
I was going to say, if you want me to at the end, I can read the super chats. I got them here.
That would be glorious. That would be excellent.
Just let me know when you want me to.
I appreciate it, Colin. It's going to be pretty soon. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. So in addition to all that what we reported with the EPA and the wayward information, contradictory information coming from the Ohio state government and the federal government, as part of the remediation process, as part of the cleanup process, they have been attempting to send truckloads of contaminated soil and water to neighboring states, including Michigan and including Texas. And I saw a clip, I don't have it, my bad, Colin, but Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman representing, I think it's Michigan's 12th district outside of Detroit, got on the House floor and said, hey, don't send that shit here. She said it way more nicely and way more professional than I just did. But just a reminder, guys, that please don't think that just because a corporate environmental catastrophe did not necessarily happen in your backyard, you could still be forced to deal with the effects and the outcomes as a result of it, because America and capitalism is not interested in actually cleaning the water and actually cleaning the soil. What they want to do is get it out of view and perhaps send it to an even less fortunate community so it can be their environmental justice problem. And this is an opportunity, I think, for people that live in red and blue states alike to understand that the corporate ruling class are the ones dictating to us the kind of health and the kind of lives that we will eventually all have. It is shameful that the EPA is not testing for all the chemicals. It's shameful that a sitting U.S. senator representing that state would tell his constituents, hey, you can come up with $4,500 extra for this water testing, right? We'll reimburse you, right? It's not like Joe Biden shortchanged you $600 during the stimulus. The Democrats are very reliable. If they owe you money, they are definitely going to pay you back your money. Absolute malarkey. So, gang, make this the time where you squad up in your respective communities, where you look outside of the political duopoly, where you don't always look to your elected officials, but instead look to your own community members and start getting organized and start understanding that no one's coming to help us. Okay. I don't think that the people of East Palestine, as much as I would like help for them to arrive, I don't think it's coming. I don't think Norfolk Southern is going to abide by what is right, as they say. I don't think that Mike DeWine is going to all of a sudden start having the water from East Palestine shipped up to the governor's mansion and drink it on a daily basis to prove how safe it is. Absolutely not. This is a time where we need to hold the oligarchs, as Margaret Kimberly so eloquently wrote in Black Agenda Report today. It's time for us to hold the oligarchs accountable and not be so mystified and surprised when these kinds of incidents continue to happen over and over again. And all of us are stuck on stoop and looking at each other like, well, what we going to do? What we going to do? It's time to burn this bitch to the ground. Proverbially, literally, however you want to take it. The system cannot be allowed to abide in its current fashion because it is going to poison and kill us all one by one, town by town, state by state. So thank you so much to Lewis and his outstanding reporting, and John, that they've been doing coming from East Palestine. And if you want to continue to support this kind of on the ground reporting that the mainstream media outlets, by virtue of their own existence, because they adhere to what the ruling class reports, right? They report what the ruling class wants us to know, and what they don't want us to know, they don't report, okay? Fortunately, Status Coup is not one of them. And Status Coup is here for you. Status Coup is one of us. This is a media outlet on the left for the people, and we want you to support in any ways that you can. So, Colin, come on back, man. Scream out them super chats for the folks, them.
All right, so we got new YouTube member Brian Caller. We got $5 from #WeOut. This is Beyond Criminal.
Hey, big up, we out. Thank you.
New member Rachel, welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Brian.
Austin for Congress, smash that like button. Agreed.
Yes.
Olivia Chipperfield, 10. I forget what's CA.
Canadian dollars, CAD.
Canadian dollars. Okay.
Thank you. We will take your loonies and your toonies, Olivia. Thank you very much for that.
Austin for Congress again. After the burn, the wind was blowing northeast.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, there's we're looking into how far symptoms might be being felt right now, actually.
Listen, I was sick, Colin, for the past 2 weeks, the past 2 Tuesdays, the Tuesday after the Super Bowl. I've been sick for 2 weeks with strange symptoms, and I don't know if it's COVID. I don't know if it was the wacky weather, or if it was fucking vinyl chloride blowing in my backyard. I don't know what's going on. Anybody else run us any bucks? Any new memberships?
We actually got a couple members at statuscoup.com/join, and that we got today Deshanti, Shelly Ann, Harry, and Isaac. So thank you guys so much. That's statuscoup.com/join, and it's separate from it's a little bit different than the YouTube membership. It obviously gives you the emojis, all that fun stuff. Oh, and new member Austin just joined as a YouTube member as well. Wonderful. But in the website, you also get access to the monthly members card. The main extra benefit of being on there, as well as YouTube takes 30% of everything, whereas through the website, it is significantly less that they take, which helps pay for these trips that like we just did.
Absolutely. YouTube 30%. That's pimp rate, right? I mean, that's pimping. I mean, is that not pimping? Jesus, you take 30% off the break regardless. So anyway, we appreciate all of your new memberships, and for those that decided to run the channel some super chat bucks, we appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching Status Coup News. My name is Kim Brown. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Burn It Down with Kim Brown, just to give you an idea of the kind of time I'm on. Okay, I do not believe that this American colony based in capitalism and white supremacy can be reformed. I think it's time that we begin anew. And I think we need to keep searching for opportunities for us to start building the new institutions in the way that we want to see them formed, that has the oligarchs at the bottom and the people at the top. So please go on over to my channel, Burn It Down with Kim Brown. Subscribe and check out some of the stuff. Big up to Black Power Media as well. This too shall pass. Black Power Media will be off of time out next week. So please go over there and check out the content of my comrades as well. Thank you so much to Louis DeAngelis for his outstanding reporting coming out of East Palestine. And of course, thanks to Jordan Sheraton and the good Colin. Carry that Thule. Let's go. Y'all have a good one, everybody. See y'all later. Bye-bye. Have a good one, Status Coopers. Community. See ya.